Hi, everybody. We're going to be kicking things off in about 2 or 3 minutes here. As you log in, make sure you have your microphones on mute. Thanks. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Andy Temeyer with the Army Corps of Engineers Omaha District. Welcome to the USACE Sustainable Project Delivery webinar series. Today, we're going to be talking about sustainable materials. And so before we kick things off, just a few housekeeping things. Please make sure your microphones are on mute. I've got a chat started, so if you have any questions during the duration of the webinar presentation, please put your questions in the chat window, and we'll try to address them throughout the presentation. Also, we may have an opportunity for some open discussion at the end of the webinar as time permits. So today, our presenter is Nicole Burman with Kansas City District. Nicole, I'm going to read her bio here. Nicole joined the Army Corps of Engineers in the summer of 2009 as an interior designer for the Kansas City District Design Branch. She eventually received her LEED certification and became a registered interior designer. She has primarily worked on military design projects within the region, including several mega and international projects. Her current role is serving as the Design Branch Technical Services Section Chief, where she supports the district in the AE acquisitions and value engineering program. For many years, she utilized her LEED training as the district sustainability manager, where she helped to facilitate high performance and sustainable designs, leading many projects to LEED, silver, and gold certifications. So without further ado, welcome, Nicole, and I'll let you take the reins from here.
Wonderful. Thanks, Andy. Welcome, everybody. So as Andy said, we're going to be talking about materials. This is really that one facet of many that we cover or have already covered in our series for sustainability, site design, construction, energy, all those elements combined are important. So when we're looking at the material element here and we're thinking of the sustainability piece in making those decisions, if you're thinking of people, economics, environmental, when it comes to those materials, we're thinking less material, using less virgin materials, using less toxic materials, things like that. So that's really where we're diving in today. Let me see if that moves. There we go. With our objective to define, hopefully you can walk away with at least one of the 5 sustainable material categories well defined in your mind. And these come from our high performance sustainable buildings, UFC 1-200-02. As we've done on several of our other webinars, we have resources here for you. Most of them are pretty similar, but I'll draw attention, though, to the green procurement ones there. There's 3 different links that we'll talk about through our slides today that are good resources or really tools that should be used when you are selecting materials. So today we'll be discussing the UFC 1-200-02, as I said, reducing that environmental impact of materials. Really, there's two major categories here, that environmentally preferred products and that waste material management, and then those subcategories that really define what we're trying to do there, that recycled content, the bio-based products, the ozone depleting substances, storage and collection, and then also that waste diversion. Those are our 5 items that we're going to be talking about. So moving into environmentally preferred products. So when we see this, we're looking at what that procurement, the UFC is requiring that procurement of construction materials and building supplies that have lesser or reduced effect on human health and the environment over their life cycle compared to other products or services of that same purpose, right? So we're really looking here, and you'll see one of those, that link down at the bottom, or that website is that tool to the GSA's Sustainable Facilities tool. So that identifies what those thresholds and items are for lesser or reduced effect. Again, we're looking here for some guidance, or we've been provided that guidance on what that kind of material, for what type of material you're putting in the building, should really be looking for. And when we come to, well, this is an example of that. I guess I'll go back for just a second. And when we're looking through all of these additional categories, these 3 categories that we have coming up next, we want to make sure that we're specifically addressing that on our projects in our DA. So when we have things that conflict with mission or other pieces that we feel we need to maybe go a little bit of a different direction than what our tools say or what the thresholds, the guidance is indicating, we want to specifically identify why we're doing that and clearly state that differing circumstance, or maybe that's even just for one part of the facility, right? So we will dive into recycled content. Here, the UFC is indicating, right, that top piece here is the use of Resource Conservative Recovery Act is identifying that we need to have products that meet or exceed the EPA's recycled content recommendations. And I kind of stand on that a little bit there. And this is all available, that link down there from the EPA is all shown, and I have an example here we can walk through, but is showing what those recommendations are. And I want to point out that this is rooted in U.S. code for federal procurement, and that code specifically says specifications require the use of recovered materials to the maximum extent possible without jeopardizing the intended end use of that item. And so that's where I kind of underline here in our example the guidelines for this, because again, we still have to make sure we have facilities that are meeting our mission needs with products that are durable and going to last the amount of time that we need, right? All of those different factors come into play, but we need to come here to these websites and make sure when we're selecting products, we're looking at, for this example, we've got the roofing material. So there's several options, even more that I'm not even showing here, right, of materials that we could possibly apply to a roof. So when we're selecting our roof and we're thinking about what those materials are, we are confirming what's that recommendation for that post-consumer content, what's that total recovered material content that we should be looking for. Some of these are fairly large ranges, so either we can maintain that range and that meets the intent, or we have enough industry products and understanding that we can even zero in on a little bit better range or smaller range, I guess I could say, for each one of those categories. So that's stuff that we, as we are picking out materials, can investigate and see and utilize. And then another added piece here, so this is similar but not the same when it comes to recycled content, but the Army policy currently, it calls out the requirement for ASHRAE 189.1, which is now referred to as the International Green, oh shoot, the term is going from me, it's on another one, but the Green Code, those are one and the same now, it's just called something different. And so that's,
right?
Thank you, I think so, yeah. And so that's a requirement to be a minimum of 15% of the building material shall be regional material. So that's just that additional step that that is identified within that policy item there. So
it's construction, by the way. My bad.
Construction. Well, we got a C in there. I know I have it on another slide. So so when we're talking about the pre-consumer and the post-consumer, what are we speaking to here? Really, we're looking at that pre-consumer, so right before it gets, to the user, to the building, to, out on the street to purchase, the diverting during manufacturing and using for another purpose, right? So reutilizing that added waste that may happen when you're cutting down a material and stuff during the manufacturing process. And then we've got the post-consumer. So this is what we're probably a little bit more familiar with, things that we see and do. So we generate by that household or the facilities that product, and then we recycle them. So we recycle our cans or our bottles. That's our post-consumer product there. So a little fun fact. Oh, and I forgot that I have pictures too. Woo! Fun fact, though, one of the largest contributing industries to the pre-consumer recycling is actually the textile industry. So that's including recycling the fibers, the fabrics, trims, unsold new garments to, third-party buyers and such like that. So all of that, contributes to that pre-consumer recycling. All right, so this is just an example when we're utilizing the sustainability facilities tool. This is an example. If you go in there, you can search for partitions and you can find toilet partitions. Say that's something you're looking for and you're trying to ensure you've got on your project. So what do I have to choose from here? What are the options? What are they expecting, right? What is that minimum requirement or that guideline? And so here, if you're looking for that steel or the plastic, this is kind of that breakdown there. So you would see a certain type of steel is 16 or 67%. Of course, as noted there, that depends on the steel specifically depends on the type of manufacturing process, which one applies. And then plastic, it can actually have a fairly large range, 20 to 100% post-consumer recycling content. So this is where we have the opportunity then to go out to industry and see what are those things that are meeting the requirements of the projects, the aesthetics you're looking for, all of the pieces and parts that go with that, that you can narrow down maybe that percentage to put in that specification to be a little bit more specific in maintaining that competition. Same with here, it even has some products like the composite panels indicate here that they have the bio-based content. So the 89% would be that understood minimum when it comes to this tool here. So in our example, what do we do with this information, right? We want to select the appropriate material for the project. We want to make sure that we see and not only have the manufacturer data sheets for compliance for, our sustainability notebook and LEED if we're pursuing that, or other third-party certifications, but also wanting to receive that when we're designing, right? because we want to check how, what that range should be, how much competitive, product items do we have when we create that range, and identify that for our contracts, making sure that we verify that competition. And then we have, of course, then putting that into action by putting that into our technical specifications, in this case, the 10, 21, 13 toilet compartments, right, as the example. So that's kind of what we would be looking for in basically all the things that we talk about today with selecting material. All right, so diving into the biologically based products is our next category. We, the UFC calls out a section of the Farm Security Rural Investment Act, and it identifies getting the highest percentage of the bio-based content, which is related to the USDA Bio-Preferred program, right? So I've got two links here, one that we've already seen, and now the USDA one for Bio-Preferred. And so we're looking for products that meet that category to the greatest extent possible. So it's written saying the highest percentage, but there's no, that varies between product, and that just, there's no specific, what does that mean, right? What is the percentage to be? So there's nothing very specific to pull down to, but we really need to identify and are called out to say that if you deviate from a product, you must document that. So really, I utilize this tool to see, do we have competition? Do we have places or products that I didn't know about that have bio-based products that I can go research and confirm that I can use that are meeting, the PSI that I need for flooring or something. And we want to confirm that we have those options, and those options, one, still exist too, because sometimes this is a little bit of a moving target when it comes to bio-based products, and what's out there now versus what was out there. But in the end, if they have products and there's multiple options for those, we really should be making that a priority. If that meets everything, that then should obviously be in our projects. And so that's a great tool to get yourself started and to be moving, and to getting as much bio-based products in there that we can. And so I kind of mentioned a little bit about how maybe these products are there or aren't there. So I will say the website is very helpful, because there's actually a lot of information on it. What does happen though, and I know that they send out, I don't know what the pattern is, but I know that USDA goes out and tries to verify these products, but they're only as good as the vendors providing that information back. So sometimes I have seen, little, I don't know, notice that says, tried to verify, never received confirmation from the manufacturer, right? So that's really actually a helpful thing to see that possibly this product that I think would be great, I need to go investigate a little bit further to confirm that it's still something that they make, and is available, or not changed into maybe a different name too, right? So there's a lot of variables there. So definitely something you want to be looking at the beginning of a project, to start figuring out kind of what way you're going in your material selection. And these are just kind of a couple examples. We've got the bio-based products really can range in both the visual aesthetic in what you have, to a point that maybe that doesn't even look any different. So you can see the agro fiber cabinets on the left. So that probably does look a little bit different from what we typically see, cabinets, laminate cabinets or something, right, for our buildings. But at the same time, it's also not so different maybe in the way that it's installed. So it would potentially just be an aesthetic piece, or I know that there's way other options now that are out there that are available that maybe don't look exactly like this anymore, but you know, that's something that would have to be discussed and found for that right application. But then we have the bio-based ceiling tiles. So they look exactly the same. So really there's no significant change in how they look, and they act the exact same, and they install the exact same, right? So nobody would be able to look at those tiles and say, that's clearly bio-based, right? So there are opportunities in here that, you know, to me, feels like that would be an automatic application no matter what the project is. And for me, that's definitely acoustical ceiling tiles. So as we've done on the past, we also bring up what are those correlating LEED-related credits, and here we actually have 3 that play into what we just discussed here. All 3 are related to that building product disclosures and optimization. And so the first one is looking, and the intent is looking at that environmental product declaration form. So really the intent here is to encourage the use of the product materials, and I'll say this several times here, right? We're looking at that life cycle information that's available that have environmentally, economically, and socially preferred life cycle impact. We're rewarding, you know, we want to reward those teams that have selected products that the manufacturers have verified with that life cycle impact. So that's really what those declarations are saying is, you know, this is what we have achieved, and it has been verified that we, you know, we have the product we say we have. So then the next one is that sourcing of raw materials. And this is where we kind of really talked about here. Again, it's still focused on that life cycle piece of it, and really looking to verify that extent or the extraction and that source was done in a, you know, responsible manner, right? So we got bio-based, we got recycled content, and then one that used to be a kind of a bigger factor in LEED, but is looped into this one, is that wood products. So the SD products fall into this category. And then the final one is that material ingredient. So this is where we dive a little deeper and we get to the root of how is this material really made? What is the ingredients of this material, and to what extent does it benefit people, right? Making sure there's no harmful substances both being used or generated from the product. So we've got a couple examples here. That would be that cradle to cradle. Declare is another one. I know like California is really in with the red list items too, which can be pretty stringent there. But either way, I want to note though, when we're really diving into this and you're trying to pursue the LEED credit here, I really suggest and urge teams to be filling out that LEED material Excel worksheet essentially as you're selecting materials or determining your materials. In the end, it's not our jobs as the DOR because it's a construction credit, but it sets your project up. One, you know that what you're specifying, and to the extent that's in that specification requirement, you're setting the project up for success. And then two, if you didn't do that, you know, there's a possibility that there could be a lot of changes in construction when they start asking or, you know, doing their own calculations and realizing things that you specified may or may not be meeting what they need to succeed as a credit that you asked for them to do. So it's kind of good to do a little bit of that upfront, you know, pre-calculation to confirm that we're headed in the right direction and we're setting up the project for success. Do we have a comment in here?
Yes, it's about sourcing.
Nicole, I was gonna.
Go ahead.
Ed?
Sure. So yes, there is a concern about supplementary cementatious materials because of Executive Order 14057 and the NDAA. The Sustainable Functional Working Group is looking into it. We have districts analyzing it along with ERDIC and Searle. I think we're going to have more information on that. We don't have it yet, and we haven't shared it, and we don't have a proposal for an adjustment to 1-200-02. But within the next year, I bet you will see some low carbon concrete. The other issue that we have is we have to coordinate with the structural discipline working group. So they will definitely be included in that discussion. And so there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of research that needs to be done. So the overall answer is yes. And then I was going to write a long diatribe, I guess, but Nicole saw the comments. So I guess I'll just say that. And if there's a following question, you can also email me with some of your other detailed questions on SCMs in concrete.
So this is Andy. So ultimately, just to summarize for audio purposes, the question is about other supplementary cementitious materials in concrete mix designs. It sounds like the NDAA and one of the executive orders has some language that addresses it, but it seems like clear guidance and policy is forthcoming.
Yeah, I think that's right. I guess I would say, maybe I'm wrong or right, I don't know, Ed, you can chime in, but, you know, if your projects are pursuing it to any level, right, or investigating anything, you know, as Ed said, there are some groups that are working on it or have been specifically designated to look at this information. But if you have information to provide, I'm sure it would be helpful to provide to Ed, and he can pass that on to others as maybe you tackle it if your projects are really itching to do such a thing. But
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So moving from that into the ozone depleting substances. So the UFC is identifying here that we don't use ozone depleting substances, or actually the high global warming potential chemicals, where the EPA has, you know, with the SNAP has identified the acceptable substitutes for those, or where other environmentally preferred products are available. So this is where we're going to, you know, EPA.gov/SNAP identifies some of these substitutes and preferred products. And some of those, you know, are focused right on the HVAC refrigerants. And then I know that, you know, when we're looking at adhesives and coatings and items like that, we'd be looking into those VOC content limitations and so forth. So that's really where, oh, the other thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned, though, the UFC also calls out an exemption, right, for the fire protection system requirement. So you go to the UFC 3-600-01 for the fire protection allowances in there. So that's a little unique set aside from that. So related to this is the prerequisite. So this is a required credit when we're going after a lead for that fundamental refrigerant management, looking to not have any of those CFC-based refrigerants in our HVAC systems. And really, there's a long line of ensuring that this is, you know, all the way back to 1987, when there's different established international agreements that happened to make sure that we're reducing or phasing out those ozone depleting substances. So this this continues to be a focus that has been stated there. And then really more importantly, right, when we're renovating projects where maybe we haven't had a chance to adjust that, or that building is historical or something like that, we have an opportunity there to change course and get to something different. Okay, so complying with material requirements. So as you can see here, there are several FAR clauses. So of course, I start off with review your FAR clauses. So let's as a team make sure that the right FAR clauses are in the projects. So when we see that front end of our projects, we can validate that. We've got a few of them listed here, and you can see that those are related to exactly what we have. You know, they align with what we're asking in the UFC. We're looking at that preferred products, and we're asking that, you know, we are designing something. So if we're in-house, we're designing it, and then we're requiring the contractor to also meet that requirement there. So that's a key thing, to make sure that if we're designing something, we are tracking that, or if we're reviewing something, we're holding people to that requirement too, and looking for those added product options. But yeah, just felt like that. I feel like this is a good tool to have in our tool belt to see what those options are, what those FAR clauses should be. Okay, storage and collection of recyclables. So the UFC calls out, here's where I have it written, yeah, the International Green Construction Code. So IGCC, as I stated, used to be ASHRAE 189.1, and they're looking for those recyclables. We've got 5 of them: the paper, corrugated cardboard, glass, plastics, metals. These are not unique to what we know. We've had them around for a while. You'll see on the next slide how they relate to lead. It's pretty similar and the same. So those are standard for us. But the UFC calls out specifically that subparagraph, the 3.4.1, that is calling for those 5 recycling materials. The Army policy actually currently takes that one step further and actually just calls out the overarching 9.3.4 instead of diving in a little deeper. So with that, it brings in the residential projects would be collecting and discarding, you know, those clean items in good condition, serving entire buildings, you know, so that would be a system that would be on the installation. It's also calling for that fluorescent high intensity discharge lamps and ballasts, so the collection of that, and then also the collection of electronics batteries for that entire collection here. So as I've noted, though, all of you know, all of these items here, like the lamps and the ballasts and the batteries and electronics, may actually be properly disposed of by the installation, you know, hazardous waste team. You know, they're, you know, as far as I know, every installation has a process. They have a method. So we just have to make sure that we know what that is. Really looking at that and understanding how that program works and what, you know, what's the process for that, so that we can accommodate that in both our designs and, you know, we'll talk next for third-party certification. So here, in my experience, you know, one of our installations very specifically says, you know, we have a process, we have every building has a designated person, and that person then is in charge of collecting. So everybody would know, I've got, you know, a lamp that I've got to go bring, you know, a fluorescent lamp that's got to be disposed of. I know I got to go talk to Bob. Bob's the one who collects it, right, and then gets it to the right location on the installation. So that is good knowledge to have, and of course each district can have that knowledge specific to their installation and be able to share that with AEs and so forth. And so this then ties in directly to that LEED. So we talked about how Army policy goes a little step further with a couple extra pieces to this puzzle. Well, they also require LEED for their third-party certification. And LEED aligns very directly. This is one of the moments when things align in our prerequisite here, and looking at making sure that we're trying to send less to the landfill. We've got our 5 recycled items, and then you have a choice to identify 2. You have to have 2 of the 3 collections. So this is where making sure you understand what the installation is doing and requiring of their facilities is a key part, because to meet this credit, you really need to be describing what that process is, because it may not be the right application to put a box that says collect batteries. I know when I mentioned that to my installation, they said, don't do that because that could become hazardous waste. If they put in the wrong battery, you now have created an issue for us, right? And so it's important to, but I have to meet this, right? The prerequisite. It's important to know the story, to be able to explain that story so that we can still meet the credit and meet the application for our installation. Okay, so waste diversion. This is not a new thing to us. It shouldn't be, right? We've been asking for waste diversion during construction. A minimum requirement actually started at 50 to my knowledge, right? And then we've moved it to, it's been moved to 60. And so that is required for our projects. It's in the specification, the guide specs, waiting for you to apply it. So really here, we're looking to, our intent is to, again, divert from landfills, and also need to be looking at and evaluating the deconstruction and salvage opportunities for the project, or of course, maybe having the contractor evaluate that for that and pieces there. I will note, though, I think we've had this conversation or had this come up on the past webinar. There has been questions, like what if the locality doesn't really enable you to divert to that 60% minimum goal, right? So if you have a situation or an installation or, the industry around you just isn't able to help enable you to meet that, we really need to see, or the project should be seeing, what that life cycle cost is, what that analysis is, to what extent maybe is more reasonable, and then making sure that you document that analysis to justify that difference there, to be able to identify why, right? We need to understand why a project can't meet that, and that may be somewhere out there that has those challenges. This is just a quick look to see where, these pieces that we're talking about today with materials land when we're looking at high performance guiding principles. This one on the screen right now is of course related to the Army record card, and really it simply is just identifying what is the team doing, and then maybe having some reasons written there or the percentage diverted there. I know we have a question here. What happens if there are not local recycling options?
Okay, so Nicole, you kind of addressed that. You document why you can't access that. In your experience, have you established a certain threshold for what passes the bar for something like that? I mean, the 60% threshold is a government side threshold, right? So I'm not aware of what substantiates the burden of proof for something like that.
Yeah, it comes down to the life cycle cost analysis. So if, you know, if you're local, I guess if I can walk this through, Kathleen, if your example here is that the local recycling option isn't available, but somewhere it is, right? So maybe it's not very local, but if you were going to go to that extent to go whatever mileage out, right, what is that cost comparison to maybe what would be considered local? That's kind of how my brain works. I don't know, Ed, if you had more to do, but that's what I would be if I had a team and I had to lead them. I would be answering, well, let's do this real fast, and it wouldn't change much, right, unless you find new resources over time. But that would be something I would apply to then each one of those projects. And then, of course, as with everything for our UFCs, it's not that you you just don't do anything. It's to what is the reasonable threshold, right? What is the extent possible for the project? So maybe there's a material that is slightly more local and reasonable, and there's other materials that you really have no options for.
So Nicole, I know early in, when LEED was first becoming available, we do a lot of work at Fort Carson and Colorado Springs. It was very difficult to find plants that would accept certain materials. And I remember us documenting, we could not find a plant that would accept, I can't remember, I'm going to say gypsum board, but I don't know if that's an accurate statement.
Sure.
And so we would document that. There's kind of two things that go with that. That may get you out of, a partial calculation for that 60% threshold at the time. I don't think it was 60%, it's probably 50%, but yep. It still may mean that you don't, if you're going to use that, or if you are going to use that to comply with a LEED credit and you no longer can't reach that threshold, that still doesn't remove your burden for LEED Silver certification on that project. So that would mean you'd need to find another credit or factor that into your calculation to make sure that you're still tracking your required certification threshold.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can see that too in your second part there, comments where when it comes to civil works projects, there could be very remote places. Sometimes we have either remote installations or you're trying to extend the UFC to the extent that that fits within a civil works project threshold there, right, outline as we should, and then we still aren't maybe able to meet all of those pieces just because it's in the middle of nowhere, right? So it's a good question. I think it just needs some additional analysis and justification for that why. Okay, so another additional credit, just to touch on a little bit here for LEED, and then we actually may have some more time to discuss here. This is not a crazy long module, but really is the Building Lifecycle Impact Reduction credit. So this is encouraging that adaptive use, trying to reuse materials. So as you can see in the requirement, there's actually 4 different ways to achieve points for this credit. The first one is that historical building reuse. So if you have historical buildings and you're looking at this, they, in my mind, should absolutely be considering this credit and working to see to what extent you can get those 5 points or not on it, because this one and the one after it are really made for the purpose of that adaptive reuse concept. And then, so that kind of goes into the renovation in an abandoned building. May not be something that we're really seeing a lot of. Typically, our abandoned buildings are marked for demo, so may not be renovating those. And then we've got the material or building material reuse, also one that may be difficult if you don't have the all the pieces and parts aligning. So if you are demoing a building as part of that project, that there could be potential there. And of course, that point range changes and goes from 2 to 4. And then the one that we're probably most often available to us is that whole building life cycle assessment. And so here, from my knowledge of it, and I'm still waiting on an AE to complete one of mine, so I haven't seen maybe a more recent example of that, but from some of the work we did originally and early on, you know, there needs to be some look at this if you're going to pursue it. Would be looking at it early, working through all the steps, because there is a process to it. It does take some time commitment, I guess I would say, to do that assessment. I don't know, Andy, have you had any projects that have worked on that one?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah.
Not that I can speak to intelligently.
Hopefully I'll share an example someday that has a success story on that one, so that we can all see that on Teams at some point. So I'm trying to track that down to see how that one's going. But yeah. Okay. So now I'm at questions. So is there anything else we want to talk about or dive into? Annette has a tool. Of course, you have a tool, Annette. I don't know if I know that one for calculating. Athena.
I think I've heard of Athena before. It's a website that has all kinds of does that have environmental product declarations and stuff like that on it as well? Annette?
Oh.
Okay. Maybe we'll need to research that and update as appropriate. So Nicole, I'm going to maybe state the obvious here, but there's obviously, and in some of the other content we're teaching, a renewed focus on embodied energy and carbon reduction and stuff like that. I don't think a lot of our current policy is specifically geared towards that, but as Ed was kind of saying, I think there's a lot of, I think headquarters and DOD is trying to contend with that. Do you know anything more, or are you able to share anything from what you see from your perspective on that? I would imagine that's going to impact materials significantly in the coming years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as I was working through these slides this time too, you know, the statements about ozone and the, you know, global warming effect and pieces like that kind of got slightly closer. So when you're looking at the lead pieces, I feel like there's something there that maybe there's lessons to be learned and where industry is right now. But yeah, I think everything from what I can tell and what Ed was even mentioning, you know, is moving towards that carbon. You know, maybe there's discussion about that concrete personally right now, but in the end, it looks like carbon is going to be that focus. So, you know, there's no direction, right? Like you said, there's no policies, there's no information specific to that yet. But, you know, as team members are working with reps and people are coming in and indicating stuff on their materials, you know, I would encourage everybody to be asking those hard questions or stupid questions, right? Maybe you don't know and I don't know what exactly to ask, but start pushing the industry to understand, hey, this is going to be important and we're going to have to solve a problem at some point here in the handful of years to come. So start asking. I know when we were pushing for several materials, like you were saying, with LEED on previous versions, and even version 4 with the product declaration, I just started asking. I knew it was coming, so I just started asking every single rep that would come through our doors or talk and do a presentation about, well, what about these, you know, environmental declaration sheets? Do you have them? Which products do you have them on? How far are you willing to go? Have you started talking about it, right? And some people are on top of it, and some people are like, let me get back to headquarters about that, right? But it started the conversation. So I think that's something similar for carbon.
And I would absolutely agree. I didn't want to speak too much on it because I thought this was a great webinar and great presentation, and we're not there yet. Both GBCI and GBI are researching as quick as they can to include it in LEED and Green Globes and all the other. So everybody's really looking at that And what we're kind of looking at is what's the requirements, which we don't have yet. Looking at what's the baseline that we're going to rate ourselves against, and what's our reduction. I see that we will have this in the UFC and there will be changes, but we're still in the research stage. So I didn't want to talk too much about it and get too many people researching it or doing that, but you absolutely can. And if you're interested in this, we are forming groups and research groups and people discussing this, just like we do with sustainability. So it's going to partner hand in hand with that. So I do foresee those changes coming, but we've got a lot of work to do before we hand them to everyone. You know, the ASHRAE 90.1 2019 change is coming out next year, and I would assume at about the same time we'll have more clear direction on how we need to incorporate it into the UFC for carbon emission reduction. But we don't want to scare too many of the structural engineers yet, or the design teams, or that this is a requirement that you'll have to do soon. But it is coming. So it's exciting to hear it mentioned and a little bit of discussion take place. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions or thoughts?
And so there's a question about, Nicole, you've already answered this, but just to capture it, there's a question about removing hazardous materials from a project site. Are those counted towards your 60% reduction? And I think you answered those materials are excluded from that calculation.
Yeah, because they were asking, do you remove those? And so, yes, you remove those and exclude that from the calculation. Correct.
Well, if there's not anything else, I think we can wrap things up. Thanks, Nicole.
Awesome.
I think we have one more webinar left. What is it on? I can't remember. I always try to prepare and then forget what it is.
What's funny is it's me. Yeah, it's documentation. There we go.
All right.
I was like, it's going to be me again. So, yes.
And that's next week. So
next week.
Thanks, everybody, for participating. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks, everybody.